Hello and welcome to Aviadev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of Aviadev Africa. For our first podcast of 2025, I'm excited to say we're going to be exploring an element of aviation that is absolutely central and critical to ensuring the health and long-term success of an airline, and that is the process of airline revenue management. Revenue management is used to optimize an airline's revenue from their available seat capacity, ensuring they sell the right seat to the right customer at the right time for the highest possible price. So what we're going to explore today is how this particular discipline is being transformed by the adoption of artificial intelligence. And to do that, I'm delighted to say that today's guests are at the forefront of this revolution, supporting airlines to adopt this game-changing technology to help them respond in real time to demand and maximize revenues for airlines. The organization in question is RTS, Revenue Technology Services. And today I'm delighted to say I'm joined by three members of the team from different parts of the globe to understand a little bit more about how these advances can positively impact African aviation and improve the robustness of African airlines. So we are joined by the president and CEO of RTS, Raja Kasilingam, Passenger Airline Vice President Bharat Kumar, and Senior Vice President Jason Codd. So welcome to the podcast, everyone. Raja, let me start with you over there in Dallas, Texas. You've got over 35 years of experience in supporting aviation, but also the wider transport industry with revenue management. And you've also been at the forefront of the research and development into revenue management. So there possibly isn't anybody in the world that knows more about it than you. But for the benefit of our listeners, can you outline the history of revenue management when it comes to airlines and how it's evolved up to this point in 2025?
Sure. If you really talk to people, different people will say different things. I think British Airways at some point in time had an idea of EMSR, or the marginal revenue management concept. But if you really look at the history, American Airlines was the first major airline to really jump into the concept of revenue management. And the way it started was, I think it was People Express at that point in time. Airline deregulation happened in 1978 or something like that. And People's Express was selling seats at a very low prices, right? And American Airlines was trying to compete with them. So they came up with the concept, if we can define certain type of product and sell it at a certain price to match People's Express, everything else we can sell it at whatever price we wanted to, we can certainly compete well with People's Express. That's how they really started. They really started defining products and put some parameters around the product and said different products will really be sold at different prices. It could be 10 days advance booking, Saturday night stay. It could be any one of those things, right? So the moral of the story was like People Express eventually got out of business because American pretty much killed it, right? And that was the first introduction of serious revenue management concepts in the airline industry, to my knowledge, on the passenger side.
And what about the evolution? Obviously, that is a really interesting story, but like it become much more complex because obviously the airlines have seen the benefit of this.
Sure. Exactly. I think originally it was called as yield management. They were just looking at $1 per seat. Then it became revenue management. But lately it has been called as margin management or profit management, because you're not just looking at maximizing revenue or optimizing revenue. You're looking at maximizing profits. And then the evolution has been, people looked at leg-based revenue management, segment-based revenue management, then they looked at origin destination-based revenue management. The other thing is more in terms of how you approach revenue management. Traditionally, they look at your capacity, look at how much you can overbook, they forecast demand, then based on fare classes and fare class demand, they assume they are independently distributed and try to allocate seats for different types of demand. That's how the whole thing started. Then different types of nesting control came into place. But the latest is more in terms of not really going through the bucket allocations, but going straight to something called as a hurdle price or continuous pricing. So at any point in time, all you do is you put out the prices as opposed to putting out the buckets of inventory. That is really the latest in terms of really doing it. Now, on the passenger side, there's a lot more to it, which I think Bharat or Jason will be able to tell you in more detail. But if you really look at revenue management from the freight or cargo standpoint, the first revenue management on the cargo side actually was origin destination based revenue management, because cargo by its very nature, it's origin destination based. It goes from point A to point B. All it matters is as long as you can get there within the defined time period, it doesn't really matter, right? So that's really, so you can look at it from number of angles, going from bucket to bucket list or margin based thing, and then going from yield revenue to margin. And then the latest concept is you really look at historical data, applied AI and ML algorithms, and try to really predict rather than doing a calculation based on different steps. You go directly to what should be the price. You don't even go through the chain process of overbooking, or if you incorporate everything together and then throw at something saying that when a customer books, this is what I want to offer, and this is the probability the customer is going to show up. So you don't even worry about any of the cancellations, no shows, none of those. You just predict show behavior at the customer level. You predict what the customer is going to pay based on the customer's profile using all the data you have, deploying AI ML methods.
Wow. Yeah. I think ultimately it's such a complex process that wasn't understood at the beginning. And as the airlines have understood, wow, there's so much to gain here, and we're operating
Right.
in a very low margin business. So revenue management is absolutely key. And I think that's what's so exciting about revenue management is there's all these little incremental changes we can make
Right.
to improve the offer that we've got. So
Sure.
sticking with you, Raja, what are some of the common mistakes that airlines make
Mhm.
in the space when it comes to revenue management? Where are they
Sure.
missing out?
I think the first thing is people jump on the bandwagon without understanding what exactly you need in order to implement revenue management. I would probably call it as something like readiness for implementing revenue management. Are you ready in terms of people, process, tools, technologies, and data? So you have to really make sure that you have the right data available in order to feed into revenue management. That's number one. You have the right process, and then you have the right people in terms of structure, organization, skill set, and everything, technology. So you have to look at all of those things before you actually do it. A good example is someone cannot simply say, just because some other airline did origin destination made revenue management, you don't have to necessarily do it. You do an analysis in terms of what's your point to point traffic, what is your traffic that goes through multiple legs. You do some analysis before you decide whether it's even worth doing O&D revenue management. Just an example, right? Similarly, do you have if you're going through product definitions and bucket-based revenue management, do you have those definitions in place so that you're not really, one type of demand is not eating into the demand of the other type of product, right? All of those things in terms of defining fare classes, making sure the data is available, you got the right technology, users are trained, you got the buy-in from the stakeholders. All of these things need to happen in order for you to be very successful in implementing as well as getting benefit. Because we have seen oftentimes carriers implement revenue management, but they, at some point in time, nobody really knows what they're using, and they start customizing. They download data, take it to a spreadsheet, do the analysis, and then manage the flights based on that, as opposed to the tool that's been developed for them. So it is important you get the whole buy-in from top to bottom, and then people, process, data, tools, technologies. You got to be ready for all those things.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, that obviously the groundwork has to be there. The
Right,
environment has to be ready to
right,
implement this, and people have to understand where it's
right.
coming from, where it's going to. But that takes us quite nicely into what we're going to talk about today, which is the
Mhm.
super exciting world of artificial intelligence. So I want to bring you in here, Bharat, if that's okay. Now, we're going to talk about the impact of AI and the specifics when it comes to revenue management. But I think just to zoom out a little bit, many of the listeners right now probably have ChatGPT on their browser. They're using some form of AI when they search on Google, they see the Gemini results, whatever it may be. AI is creeping into everyday parlance and everyday business now. But you're an expert when it comes to this. So can you explain AI to the listeners in simple terms? So just so we've got that out there as what is it?
Sure, John. First of all, I'm not an expert. At least I don't claim to be an expert on AI. Yes, I do understand and try to make most out of it. When it comes to how we can explain, right? Basically, if we can think of AI as a kind of when we are trying to teach machines to do certain tasks or perform certain tasks which require like human intelligence, right? Then it will be easy for us to relate to it, right? In that sense, that this is artificial intelligence where machines are able to learn and do the same task as human could do. So the automating this through the machine is a kind of AI, right? In simple context. Now, when it comes to different other technology, at least in RTS context, for example, deep neural network. In case of deep neural network, obviously it requires huge amount of data, like a big data and it has an ability to process or analyze a complex data set and do different kind of predictions, for example, demand or any other output what you need from a neural network, basically. When it comes to generative AI, for example, chat GPT kind of solution, basically it is more helpful, at least for us, is it to simulate different kind of scenarios, right? That if a certain specific event happens, what will be the impact of it, for example, right? So this is, I would call it the AI way of doing different things. Now, the last one, which in it, at least which we have been working on or thinking on, is neurosymbolic AI. Neurosymbolic, maybe the terminology looks quite very complex and so on, but basically it's a way to simplify the reasoning on the AI side. So you don't have to write a complex big model. Rather, you say, for example, uh, let's say if I throw the or throw leave the ball in my hand, it will go and fall on the floor. It's a Newton's law. Probably if you want to teach AI, we will write a lot of code to train the model and to learn. Rather than we can put a statement with the reasoning where, we can say, okay, this is a Newton's law and this should work like that. It's in a very simplistic way. So that is a neurosymbolic way of doing things. Obviously, it also helps us with the combination of explainable in order to actually analyze what has happened, why the particular reason or particular decision had been taken, for example, right? In science, there are a lot of complex things happen in or processes happen in revenue management. But when the data goes inside and when the output comes, we only know the final result and we don't know why particular result has been out in final. So that is the neurosymbolic in combination with explainable AI that helps us in the process and understanding better backward or the future scenarios as well.
Yeah, great. And I think you've alluded to it now with the whole kind of looking at how the decisions are made. And that's why we've entitled this episode about glass box rather than black box. We'll come to that shortly. But just sticking with you, obviously aviation and AI is where I want to go next. And it's an industry that is only where it is because people have been bold enough to innovate and adopt and accept innovation. The idea 150 years ago that people would be flying around, 100 years ago, flying around in these big tubes is crazy. But also paradoxically, it is a industry that's heavily encumbered with regulation. It can be quite slow moving and there can be a reluctance to change. So with that in mind, what are some of the challenges holding back the adoption of AI when it comes to the aviation industry?
The first thing is the mindset or how the way we work in the industry. There are a lot of other reasons as well. For example, like you mentioned, regulations and even the regulatory hurdles, right? And let's say, for example, uh, the way we have been doing things for, let's say, several decades, basically, and it makes us comfortable, right? And doing coming out of that shell is also very painful for everyone. So that these are few reasons, but most I would say that the mindset and adopting the new ways is big change for everyone. And as a human being, I think the psychology, obviously, we try to right to go to unknown, right? Basically, so that's what it is.
Yeah, there's a natural resistance to change. There's also a natural skepticism, I think, as well, when it comes to anything new. So that's where I want to bring you in, Jason, because of course you're in constant contact with the airlines themselves. You're talking to them about these different practices, and we'll come to the product in a minute. But what is their general kind of receptiveness in your experience to the whole idea of bringing AI into their operation?
It becomes an interesting one because I think you hit the nail on the head with the resistance to change. I think that's the biggest thing. I've been doing this for more years than I care to remember. And even if you're introducing standard off the shelf, old school revenue management systems in the 90s, there is still a resistance to change there. Now you're throwing out something which is technologically advanced. We've all seen Terminator and things like that. So you've got these little niggles in the back of your mind. That reluctance to change coupled with a fear of the unknown, a fear of what AI actually is. I don't know your experience. My mother has this pathological hatred for AI at the moment, to the point that she won't believe any video that she sees anywhere, because it absolutely cannot be true, because AI is generating this. And as much as you want to convince her that, yes, Air Force jet a Navy jet lands on an aircraft carrier, which is only 300 yards long, she's not going to believe it. And getting people past that hurdle is probably the biggest point. So how do you do it? You'd look at smaller projects. Maybe you don't go with big bang, run your entire airline on AI type of thing. Those smaller projects that people have started to do with customer service chatbots, perhaps, or other smaller areas of it, you're going to overcome that resistance, I think, by small projects, small chunks at a time, and getting that belief going, hang on, this does actually work, and demonstrate results. Once you've got that foot in the door, that then allows you to roll out more complex solutions with it.
Yeah, I think it's about building trust in a technology. And a great way to do that is to implement it slowly in a small way first, and then saying, oh, this is adding value. Okay, we can expand, rather than diving in with 2 feet. But also the other element of this, which I want to come to you on, Jason, is the element of transparency and understanding how something works. Because Bharat touched on this, that you put something in, you get something out. And if you don't really understand the process, you can maybe not trust it. As I said, the title of the blog, the title of the episode is From Black Box to Glass Box. And that implies that there is a more transparent process here that you can actually understand as a human being. How is the AI coming up with this solution? So can you elaborate how that works on a revenue management perspective, Jason?
Yeah. So from an RTS perspective, we've always tried to be as transparent as possible with recommendations, suggestions, decisions coming out. But because a lot of the result set are tied to certain algorithms, sometimes it takes quite a really deep dive into figuring out the process flow. Changing this one number on the input side does an amazing thing on the output end, but you've got to really step through the whole process as to why did this change, why did that change, and it can involve a fair bit of analysis. We try to make as much of that historically available to the user as possible, but even it does still have that element of black box involved. And a lot of people, as long as they're happy with the output numbers, may not dig into it necessarily. All of those really are more data-driven approaches. So your decision process is purely data-driven. Where Bharat was mentioning earlier, based on some of the various AI type options and output, you're shifting that very data-centric process to more a decision-centric process. So some of those models, what they're doing is the explainable AI part of it is your result set is not only here is what we suggest you should do, or here is what we tell you to do. It's up to you to choose to do it. But along with those recommendations, here is our reasoning behind it. And that reasoning is giving you the highlights of each step in the process that the data has been through, what your data sources are, and it's coming out. And to make it fairly simplistically, it may be saying you need to drop the price on flight XYZ by $10. And the reason is there's something happening in a neighboring market. We've identified there's something here came up on social media. We know one of the competitors has canceled flights because they've got an aircraft US. You're getting that information with you along with the recommendation. So you're almost not having to take the decision. The decision is being made for you by a very intelligent revenue manager, or however you'd want to phrase that. But they're not only telling you what the decision is, they're telling you how they arrived at that decision. So you ultimately are just saying, I agree or I disagree with you. Maybe your reasoning was wrong, go back and fix it. Or, hey, I'm happy enough with that. Let's hit the go button on it.
Yeah, that's the game changer, is the explanation. And this comes back to your example with your mum, right? In a way that you need to be able to show under the hood, look, this is not only how it works, but why we came to this decision. And then the individuals, the executives can say, we trust the data. We are going to check out these sources, but obviously it's been pulled from AI. And this is the reasoning why. So we'll just double check everything. But now we can present something to the board to say, do we do X? Do we do Y? In the same way that, but you can respond a lot quicker. And to your point, Bharat, you can do this to try and get ahead of it. And what Rajan said as well, it's about trying to get ahead of it rather than always looking backwards and looking at historic data. So I think from that side then, Bharat, we've seen the adoption of AI in certain industries just take off. In other industries, huge resistance. Where do you think aviation is? And are we on the cusp of a revolution when it comes to bringing AI into the everyday processes in airlines?
Without a doubt, John, the time is now for sure. Obviously, last maybe almost a decade or a little less than decade have been already a transformative years or moment for aviation industry, and especially for African carriers now. It's important, right? AI has already transformed or is still transforming other industries like finance or retail or even healthcare. They are having specific challenges or unique for airline industry especially. And how exactly AI can make a significant impact, that is important. The new approach, what we are suggesting is actually, like even Jason mentioned, it's a big evolution or change from data-driven solution to or data-driven approach to a decision-centric approach. And what does it mean, decision-centric? For example, today, a lot of leaders, they do rely on different data decision or data analysis when they are making a decision. But still there is a gap. Most of the time, only one senior person who is just listening to all the analysis, analyzing himself and then making decision himself, right? We have not reached a stage where we can just leave it to the data to our machine to say, okay, this should be the decision. That should be only be used in an augmented way until the AGI takes place, which is still quite some time. And with this differential approach of a decision centric, basically, what we call it a continuous, contextual, and connected decision making. And it's not just about automation, right? It's basically enabling airlines to deliver a personalized service and while same time optimizing the revenue as well, right? And this technology has actually matured a lot. And I think African Airlines or even industries is ready for the transformation. With the ITNDC, they have been already quite busy, and this is going to further help airlines, on this particular approach.
Yeah, definitely. And Raj, I wanted to ask you, because something that jumped into my head when I read the blog was all about the booking channels and how this is going to adapt as this goes through. Because, of course, most airlines, if you ask them, of course, they would love to sell direct to the consumer, cut out the middleman, lose the commissions. But most can't do that. Obviously, low-cost carriers, app-based carriers, they like to do this. But I guess, how do you see this being disrupted by AI? Will it be the demise of the OTA, the GDS, or are they still going to play a role in distribution and visibility for these roles? Like, where do you see it? Where's the balance of power?
Okay. Great question. I wish I could answer that. It is very difficult to really predict what is going to happen, but the combination of e-commerce and AI is probably going to make it more in terms of moving away from a lot of the traditional channels. It may become something more like the way we buy stuff for retail product. It could become very similar to that, where an individual goes to, so I'm not sure if the GDS per se will go away, but there could be one system through which people could buy any airline tickets. And that system is going to have the capabilities of AI in terms of having the information on the buyer's behavior, like the way we do it in Amazon and other e-commerce platforms. So I'm thinking there will be either the GDS becomes a true e-commerce platform, which learns based on people booking and their behavior and what they want and take it to the next step. But I'm not sure whether GDS will completely go away. It could transform into something completely different. And a lot of the other booking systems, like the one we have, Expedia, Price, I have a feeling some of those will probably disappear, in my opinion. or they could compete with each other. But that's, and again, it's hard to predict for me because I'm not really at the forefront of that. So I can't really predict. But
Yeah. I'll ask you as well, Bharat, on that. But I guess you've got a platform like a Skyscanner, for example, that obviously searches the database and is very B2C, is something that a consumer can use very simply. But what you've got through the Expedia channels is, of course, all the NDC elements and the upselling of car hire and hotels and holidays and all that sort of stuff. And I suppose there's going to be a convergence. The airlines are desperate to do this themselves. We see that with all the airlines offer these products. When you go to book a ticket, are you sure you don't want a car? Do you want a hotel? They want to capture this themselves if they can directly. But in the absence of that, they know they have to work with the OTAs and the GDS and everything else. So do you broadly agree, Bharat, with what Raja said? Have you got anything else to add?
No, I'm sure Raja is right. And we can't exactly predict what will happen with some of these channels. If you see the online bookings, basically 50% of the bookings have already been online these days in recent years or last decade almost, probably, I don't know. When it comes to OTAs, and I mean, there is OTA, then there are like aggregator, and then there are different kind of stakeholder how defined in passenger side of the business. Kayak and Expedia, they have already tried to come up with the new ideas or new innovations on their platform. For example, AI based me advisor or assistant for the users. Also in terms of, for example, price alert for the possible customer. So they're coming up with a new and unique, capability. So I think they will survive, but Raja said that some of them will consolidate probably. I don't know exactly, how it will transform, but basically the whole ecosystem adopts when the change comes.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. And change is inevitable. Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it's not your business directly, right? What you're there to do is to help the airline improve its revenue management, and the channels of how people book you're pretty agnostic as to how somebody books. It's really about using the technology to improve the airline profitability. And we see in an African context, I want to come back to you, Jason, the load factor is improving, but it's still below 80% for Africa. And in a great market where there is a lack of capacity and there's more demand than supply on a global context, we've got to improve that. And revenue management is a way to improve that load factor. And it is one of the very crude metrics, of course. But I think what I wanted to ask you is a bit of feedback on that. And how do they get more bums on seats? But also, if they want to look at getting your solution into their business and discussing that, is it a massive step change, or is this something that can be done incrementally? Does it require huge capital outlay, loads of time? Where are we at? So if you can take those couple of points.
Well, I think, I suppose that is a two-part question. Africa has traditionally had those load factors for a number of years there. And I think part of it is a focus on yield more than anything. Raja mentioned yield management had evolved to revenue and then margin and profit management over the years. I think it's a case of being able to do not only effective revenue management, be it through your own channels or through online travel agencies, aggregators, etc., but also, whatever channel you use to get the best prices out to these guys quicker. I don't know if you've used, there was one of the American online travel agents that I pretty much refused to use because it was such a frustration, because you'd get a price, you'd have to go through an entire booking process. And at the end of it, that price has gone from $1,000 to $1,500. And they'll just say, sorry, that price is not available. We can offer you this. At which point in time, I'm not very polite. So I would tell it exactly where it could go, and I won't use them typically. So part of that whole revenue management process is not only being able to consider discounting slightly to get that load factor filled up, but getting that discounted price in front of the consumer immediately and instantly. And I think that's where some of these OTAs and things are going to have to evolve to fit that model, because it all has to happen in real time or near real time, because otherwise you lose passengers. And getting that pricing is what will increase load factors as well. You can't stimulate demand completely if there is zero demand in a market, But where the market has demand, you can trigger behavior change. You can trigger travel by correct pricing, shall we say. That second part of the question, to actually get it implemented, there's a cost element to it. Certainly, nothing happens for free. Whether you're doing a traditional revenue management system or next gen type thing, there's going to be a cost element. Your next gen is probably going to cost you slightly more than a traditional system would cost you. But on the flip side, you're also looking at gains over what a traditional revenue management system would give you. And I know this isn't a sales call as such, but one of the things that we'll discuss with people typically is, how do you figure that into let's say, a profit sharing approach to these things? We want our clients to be successful, and the more successful they are, we'd like to be successful as well. So it may not be pure cost. There may be elements that only come into play above certain levels of profitability or gains. So that's the kind of approach we would take with it. And then resource wise, it depends on the resources you've got in-house at the moment. But the whole idea behind this is almost a resource augmentation. The solution itself, because it's performing the function of the revenue manager, it's giving you the decisions and the reasoning behind the decisions. You're actually freeing up existing staff to function elsewhere. Because I think this is the big fear that people have. AI is going to make us redundant. I don't think that's the case. I think jobs are going to evolve, your functions are going to evolve, and let AI do the drudge work. You'd mentioned somewhere, I think earlier, on taking a spreadsheet, and people are doing things in a spreadsheet somewhere. Why? I know of an example where somebody literally would take from one system, print out a list of figures, go and sit at their desk and type that list back into Excel. Now, to me, that's something we would call make work. It was completely unnecessary. It could be automated. This is that to the nth degree. Let the automation do what automation does best and free up your resources to function on other areas where you actually need that human eye.
Yeah, really well put. I think that's how a lot of people have started to use AI in their everyday life as well, as it's a starting point. So you go in and you say, give me some ideas for this. And then it's up to you and your own individual creativity to say, AI's done 70% of the work. And now it's up to me to polish that and make it mine. And some people just refute using it. But why would you do that 70% if it is stuff that you're going to come to that conclusion? You're just going to waste your time. So I think that's a really good point. And to your point about this is, you would have to sit down with the airline, understand where they're at with their processes at the moment, what kind of solution is best for them. But the key is, this product could actually pay for itself, whatever the investment is, day to day. If you're increasing your revenue and increasing your yields and your margins by percentages here and there, then it's paying for itself and you've got a robust product. And that, I'm sure, is the key message over time. They get used to it. They're making better decisions in real time, and it starts to prove itself. And that's what I'm excited about, is telling more of these case studies. Obviously, we can't get into the nitty gritty of airlines, P&Ls and things like that, but there could be some general case studies that we can focus on over the next few months as well to talk about. I think I want to come to you, Bharat, close us off. Obviously, we've got a committed listenership from the airline and the aviation industry. If they want to find out more, where can they go? Who should they connect with? And I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes.
Definitely. I would encourage any airline who's interested, they should join AviaDev Conference, Africa, in Zanzibar in June this year. We'll be there, and we would definitely like to go a bit deeper, probably with our new innovations and research, what we are trying to do. And it may be explain the real world examples, how they can improve their revenues or transform their operations. And more than that, obviously, we'll be available for one-on-one discussions during those conference days, and try to understand their challenges, because every airline is different, right? They have different challenges, and that's why I would like to have one-on-one discussion over a 3-day period. And it's about partnering with airlines to drive their success, because their success will be our success as well, right? And it will help in the competitive world, everyone, basically. So that's it.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's come across today is it's all about a partnership. It's about, as Jason said, your success is our success. And it's also about having a look at something new. So my sort of call to action for those listeners is get in touch with the team and just have a look at this and give them some information so that Bharat, so that Jason, so that the team can really understand what it is you're doing at the moment and how that can be tweaked one way or another. Because like you say, you're not just going to go in there with this is the solution. The solution is bespoke according to the need. But I think we've got a really good place to start. And obviously it would be great to have the RTS team with us in Zanzibar in June. So we're looking forward to having you with us there. The airlines are all coming in, which is fantastic. And you'll be there to take meetings as well. So all it remains from me is to say thank you to the three of you for joining us today from your different parts of the world. Yeah, thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate it.
Okay.
Pleasure,
John. Thank you very much.
Good, very good. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And as outlined, I'm going to include the links to the websites, to the individuals, their LinkedIn profiles in the show notes. There'll also be a link to the full blog post on the RTS website. You can have a read of that after you've listened to this. And if you did enjoy the episode, please do share it with somebody in your network that you think would benefit from having a listen. Don't forget to subscribe, and then you will never miss another episode. So thank you all for joining us, and see you for the next episode very soon. Take care.